What if I told you the most powerful currency in the world
was never truly chosen by the market,
but decided behind closed doors during a war?
In 1944, while World War II was still raging, 44 countries met in secret and built a system that turned the United States dollar into the center of the global economy.
For decades, it gave America unmatched financial power. But now, that system is starting to crack. And if it breaks, it could change the entire world economy.
So here is our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to break this down into 5 distinct chapters. 1. A world in chaos. 2. The Bretton Woods Deal. 3. The 1971 Nixon shock. 4. The dollar's hidden power. And finally, 5. The de-dollarization era. Let's dive right in.
Chapter 1. A World in Chaos.
Before we can even begin to understand the incredibly complex financial system we live in today, we really have to look back at the grim, chaotic reality that forced it into existence in the first place. I want you to mentally place yourself right here in the middle of this timeline in the year 1944. The world was, quite literally, burning. World War II is still raging aggressively across multiple continents. Europe's industrial infrastructure completely decimated. And as a direct result of that unimaginable physical devastation, economies across the entire globe were essentially in free fall. I mean, they were collapsing. The old financial systems had completely failed. National currencies were wildly unstable, suffering from extreme hyperinflation and a total lack of international trust. Global trade had pretty much ground to a terrifying halt. The entire globe desperately needed a hard reset. They needed a way to ensure that post-war recovery was even mathematically possible. So, driven by pure economic desperation and necessity, brilliant minds and powerful representatives from 44 allied nations traveled to a small, quiet, and highly secure resort in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Now, let's be clear, they absolutely did not go there for a mountain vacation. They went there with one massive goal: to establish permanent financial order out of total global chaos.
Chapter 2. The Bretton Woods Deal.
This secret gathering in the mountains of New Hampshire wasn't just your standard diplomatic summit. Led by towering economic figures like America's Harry Dexter White and Britain's John Maynard Keynes, this was the exact moment the future of global money was permanently rewritten. Over the course of 3 incredibly intense weeks, these 44 countries hashed out a totally new international structure, and it was built on 3 absolutely crucial pillars. First, the United States dollar became the undisputed center of global trade. Instead of using gold to trade directly with one another like they used to, countries agreed to link their own national currencies directly to the US dollar at a fixed exchange rate. Second, to ensure everyone actually trusted this radical new idea, the US dollar itself would be fully backed by physical gold. We're talking real, tangible gold bars locked away in American vaults at a fixed, unchangeable rate of $35 an ounce. This was the masterstroke. It gave the global system its vital bedrock of trust and stability. You could always, theoretically, trade your paper dollars in for physical gold. And third, because the US held the vast majority of the world's physical gold reserves at the time, this framework essentially crowned the United States as the undeniable financial anchor of the entire world. This is what became known in history as the Bretton Woods Agreement. It literally made the US dollar the king of global finance.
But the masterminds of Bretton Woods, they were smart. They knew that just signing a paper linking currencies together wouldn't be nearly enough to sustain a global economy over the long haul. You need enforcement, you need infrastructure. So the agreement also birthed 2 massive, deeply powerful global institutions that, quite frankly, still dominate international news to this very day: the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, and the World Bank. These weren't just symbolic offices. Not at all. The IMF was designed specifically to be the global referee. It was meant to oversee this complex new currency peg system and step in to lend money when countries faced urgent financial crises. Meanwhile, the World Bank was created with the immediate goal of funding the massive physical reconstruction of a war-torn Europe and eventually facilitating long-term development across the globe. Through these 2 powerful institutions and that gold-backed peg system we just talked about, the dollar was permanently transformed. From 1944 onward, the dollar wasn't just a simple paper currency used to buy domestic goods in America. It became an international instrument of absolute global power. It was the very foundation upon which the entire post-war world was built.
Chapter 3. The 1971 Nixon shock.
So, for a few decades, this Bretton Woods system worked basically exactly as intended. It drove an era of truly unprecedented global economic expansion. But by the late 1960s, deep structural cracks began to show in the foundation. Here's the thing about a gold-backed financial system: it requires intense, unwavering economic discipline. And eventually, the pure mathematics of the system simply broke. Throughout the late 1960s, the United States was spending incredibly heavily. We are talking about massive, simultaneous expenditures. You had the Vietnam War overseas, which was hugely expensive, and you had these ambitious, Great Society domestic programs at home. To pay for all of this, without massively hiking up taxes, the US government essentially began running the printing presses on overdrive. But right here is the fatal flaw hidden in the plumbing of the system. Far more paper dollars were being printed into existence than the actual physical bars of gold sitting in the vaults to back them up. And of course, global allies started to notice this incredibly dangerous imbalance. Countries began demanding their physical gold in exchange for their paper dollars. They wanted their hard assets. This pushed the foundational trust of the entire Bretton Woods Agreement right to the brink of collapse.
Faced with this rapidly breaking system and a terrifying literal run on America's gold reserves by foreign nations, President Richard Nixon had to act, and he made a truly shocking macroeconomic decision on a Sunday night in August 1971. Without consulting the rest of the world, which is a huge deal, he unilaterally suspended and ultimately ended the dollar's direct convertibility to gold entirely. This massive historical event became known globally as the Nixon shock, and it completely rewired the DNA of the global financial system overnight. Seriously, think about this before and after. Before 1971, the world trusted the dollar because it was a direct, guaranteed claim on a physical piece of gold. It was a receipt for a rock. After 1971, the dollar was backed by something entirely intangible. It became what is known in economics as a fiat currency, money that is backed strictly by the full faith, credit, and trust in the U.S. government, its ability to tax its citizens, and its ability to maintain a powerful military. The entire global economy pivoted on this single drastic decision. We collectively abandoned hard physical assets for a system of pure, unadulterated belief.
Chapter 4. The Dollar's Hidden Power.
Now, this sudden shift in 1971 brings us to a deeply fascinating question. If the physical gold was totally gone, and that original 1944 Bretton Woods Agreement was essentially voided, how in the world did the dollar remain totally dominant? Why didn't the entire financial system simply collapse into hyperinflation right then and there? The answer lies in an inescapable geopolitical cycle that was cemented shortly after the Nixon shock. Specifically, it happened through a highly strategic series of agreements with Saudi Arabia in the 1970s. This is what created the petrodollar. Let's walk through exactly how this modern world functions, step by step, because it's brilliant. Step 1. The modern world desperately needs energy, specifically crude oil. You need it to run factories, militaries, and entire economies. Step 2. Through these international agreements led by the US and Saudi Arabia, global oil is priced and sold almost exclusively in United States dollars. If you want oil, you need dollars. Step 3. Because the entire world needs to buy oil just to survive, the entire world needs to hold massive amounts of US dollars. This creates a permanent, artificial, and truly massive global demand for American currency. This incredible demand meant the US could continue to print money to fund its deficits without immediately hyperinflating its own economy. Essentially, America was able to export its inflation to the rest of the globe. And step 4, the world accepts it. Because energy and global trade happen in dollars, foreign central banks are literally forced to hold trillions of dollars as their national reserves. The fundamental global need for energy forced everyone to keep using the dollar. It kept the US financial empire alive and thriving without relying on a single ounce of gold.
I really want you to absorb the sheer magnitude of this historical shift. The creation of this fiat petrodollar system generated an economic reality that historians describe with a profound realization. It created, quote, a level of power no empire in history had ever achieved. By possessing the world's unquestioned reserve currency, a currency backed only by abstract trust, but demanded by absolute global necessity for energy and trade, the United States gained an unprecedented geopolitical superpower. In economics, this is known as the exorbitant privilege. Just imagine having the extraordinary ability to simply type numbers into a central bank computer screen, essentially creating currency out of thin air. And the entire globe just accepts that newly created money in exchange for real, hard, physical goods. Things like electronics, natural resources, cars, and human labor. It is an extraordinary, unmatched advantage, and it's exactly what has defined global geopolitics, funded massive militaries, and driven global economics for the last 50 years.
Chapter 5. The De-Dollarization Era.
Okay, now we need to anchor this heavy historical lesson firmly to the present day. Because that incredibly powerful 80-year grip on the global economy that we just outlined, it is actively being threatened right now. Today, something fundamental is fracturing. Countries are starting to actively question and push back against this dollar-dominated system. And we are seeing concrete, real-world examples of a massive macroeconomic shift.
Nations like China and Russia, along with the broader BRICS coalition, which includes major players like Brazil, India, and South Africa, they are pushing hard to conduct bilateral trade in their own local currencies. They want to use the yuan or the ruble, deliberately bypassing the need to convert everything into US dollars first. Furthermore, they are actively building entirely new financial payment networks to bypass US-controlled clearinghouses like SWIFT. So you have to ask, why is this happening now, after so many decades? Well, it's a complex combination of things. You have rising geopolitical tensions, the rapid rise of competing global economies, and crucially, the aggressive weaponization of the dollar through crippling financial sanctions. When sovereign nations see that access to the global dollar system can be instantly turned off by Washington, it basically forces them to quickly find backup plans. This is exactly why we're seeing central banks across the world buying record amounts of physical gold once again. They are actively trying to diversify away from US debt.
And this brings us directly to a critical, highly debated economic concept that you've probably seen in the headlines: de-dollarization. It is defined as the complex, extremely slow process of nations intentionally and systematically weakening the US dollar's global dominance in trade and reserves. Now, I want to be very clear here because there is often a ton of hype around this topic. This is absolutely not something that happens overnight. You can't just flip a switch. Untangling decades of deeply integrated global trade networks, international debt structures, and deep financial plumbing is a massively difficult generation-spanning task. It's like trying to turn a massive cargo ship, not a speedboat. But the process is undeniably underway. The bedrock foundations built by those 44 nations back in 1944 and the system drastically modified by Richard Nixon in 1971, they are facing genuine structural challenges today. Powerful, well-funded nations are actively looking to finally break free from that inescapable cycle of dollar reliance.
So what is the ultimate takeaway from all of this historical context? Look, the US dollar is still king today. That is just an undeniable economic fact. It still vastly dominates global trade and foreign exchange reserves. But history shows us one harsh, inescapable, and undefeated reality. No financial system lasts forever. The Dutch guilder had its magnificent era. The British pound ruled the world before 2 world wars completely exhausted its empire. The unmatched power created at that small, secretive resort in Bretton Woods gave America the ultimate financial advantage for nearly a century. But today, right now, that immense power is facing its ultimate defining test on the global stage.
Which leaves us with a deeply provocative question. Maybe the most important economic question of our lifetime isn't whether the dollar's absolute global dominance will eventually fall, but when. When will that absolute tipping point be reached? And perhaps, more terrifyingly, what exactly comes next?
Because remember exactly how this all started. Just like in that secret high-stakes meeting in 1944, where the fate of the entire world's money was decided behind closed doors during a time of immense global chaos, the future of the world's money, the architecture of the very next global financial system, might already be taking shape right now, quietly, in the background, waiting patiently for its moment to emerge.
I hope this explainer really helped you understand the massive historical forces at play in our economy today. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe, my channel, like, and share your thoughts in the comments below.